You are very welcome to this video. I need to apologise first of all for the bangs and clatters. I must do something to soften the sound of things touching the desk. Not too sure what. I have leather, so maybe some leather feet. I don't know. We will see. Okay, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to Andy Pandy, who leaves me lots of comments, and they are super useful. So if you haven't read the comments, please go and read them in the previous videos. They are really useful, honest. Okay, they give all sorts of information. So today we're looking at cutting leather and the lessons that I've learnt from cutting leather. Now, the first thing I learnt, let me just put one or two things here. And the first thing I learnt is that you need a very sharp blade. Okay, and I do mean very sharp. I mean, the sharper the better. It's as simple as that. And if you're not using a box cutter, a Stanley knife, that type of thing, but you're using a leather cutting knife or whatever, make sure the blade is polished. And I suppose I would be able to polish this blade, and I might actually try it in the next video when I do some stropping or something like that. We will try that. But the first thing is, you need a very sharp knife. The second thing I learned was the surface, and I originally tried with the cutting mat, and it wasn't really very good at all. So I went out and bought this cheap nylon board, and that is really a lot better. It is. And it cost next to nothing at the local supermarket. So strongly recommend getting yourself a cheap cutting board of some sort, because I seem to be able to cut very much better on this. The third thing I learnt was, whatever you're cutting with, it mustn't move. Now, if you see the previous video, you'll notice that I was using this coin, and I was trying to cut a circle, and it wasn't that circle. Which circle was it? I've lost the circle. Ah, there we are. I was trying to cut this circle, and the coin kept moving, and that was basically due to the edges, but also because it is actually quite slippy. It moves very easily. But if you look at the ruler here, okay, and I put just a little bit of pressure on, it's actually much more difficult to move it. So you need to have some sort of non-slip surface on your straight edge or whatever you're using to cut against. So this is a corked back ruler. There's a link to it in the description below, and I would strongly recommend that you use something like this if you're actually going to be cutting in straight lines on your leather. When I used it to cut this piece, well, you can see I didn't quite do the right thing at the end, but I'll come to that in a moment. Okay, it did a very good job of cutting a straight line. The next thing I learnt was only cut a short distance at a time. Okay, don't try and do the whole thing, even if it's only 30 centimeters, 1 foot long, 12 inches or whatever. Okay, do a little bit. If necessary, move the ruler, move the straight edge or whatever as required. Don't try and do it all at once. Okay, and to go with that was and you'll see this certainly when I was cutting this piece of leather here, is don't try and do it in multiple, don't try and do it all at once. Do it in multiple cuts. So if I remember rightly, that took me 4 cuts to cut that. Okay, so that will certainly help you a lot by cutting just a little bit at a time. And of course what does help is the fact that once you've actually made one cut, usually, except for here, the blade will run along the section that you've cut. Now this is very much thanks to Andy, and one of his suggestions. He said that as you get to the end of your cut, you need to put more pressure on the blade and push down further. And you can see that he is ever so correct, because you can see here that I didn't do it, and that's the result. Okay, that will cut off. That's not a problem. That will, that will cut off. But I've left it there as a reminder to me that I need, as I'm cutting, you start off fairly light and get more and more pressure towards the end. Okay, so those are the main things that I've learned about cutting. Now I did do some cutting of circles and that type of thing, and what I learned from that is I need a lot of practice. So quite simply, I'm going to be doing a lot of cuts on leather, straight initially, and then I will do rounded cuts as well. And I need to find something which will be able to do the corners that won't slip as I try and cut it. Now I did, with one of these, I did actually mark it out. Here we go. I did actually mark it out, okay, with the awl, and it did a very good job of marking it out, but of course I made a real dog's dinner of trying to cut it. So I'm going to need lots and lots of practice in order to cut that successfully. And the final thing I think I learned is that if you need to make a rounded end, okay, if you have a hole punch the right size, use the hole punch, because that will get the rounded end for you. So I haven't tried that. I have hole punches and that type of thing, but I haven't tried it. But it just seems reasonable to me that if you've got the right size hole punch, use it. Okay. One thing you might have noticed is that my cuts are not flat. That's at an angle. Okay, I was cutting round a glass, and I was cutting at the blade was at an angle as I went round the glass, but that's not the only piece that I cut at an angle. That one was cut fairly straight, but there was another piece as I was cutting it. That one's there. It's not absolutely vertical. So again, all of this is just practice. It's just practice. So over the next few days I'm going to practice cutting pieces off, just little cuts and that type of thing, until I am better at cutting leather. So thank you very much indeed. Please comment. I do need your comments, I do need your suggestions, I do need your tips, and they will of course help anybody who's going to watch these videos in the future.